Hi, welcome to my channel. This is Socialist Links. Here, I kind of want to talk about the current housing crisis that the United States is going through right now, and about like various problems that it's basically facing, due to the capitalist system itself. For some background information on on the making of this video, I was actually gonna write. I was supposed to write a paper basically simplifying various tactics in order to basically finance housing or finance real estate for that matter. Once you basically are a property owner in the capitalist system, and one of those tactics I was supposed to write about was the BRRRR method, as in the buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat method that various investors and banks use often in order to be able to get profit, and be able to essentially have a high price of rent within the United States. I was supposed to write a simplified essay on it, but you know me when it comes to economics. If you know me when it comes to economics, you can't really just give me a task to describe, a simple like capitalist system without basically me, going in full total analysis like of what the consequences of that is, and how it's very affected, and how it's affected the people involved in it. And here, this is what I write about actually. So here, I kind of want to talk about the Burr method, as it's called, in order to further convey a lot of the problems that like this method does indeed have in our capitalist system, and one of the reasons why we are going through a housing crisis right now through the capitalist economic structure, and the reasons why these problems are indeed coming about from further privatization and from further systematics of tenantry being in place within capitalism in the United States. So yeah, without further ado, however, we should probably get started. But I want to basically say that this video is a video that basically talks about the housing question and talks about like a lot of these problems. And there's many other works and other videos out there that talk about the current housing crisis, and but this is just really basically my perspective on it, which is kind of a repeat of other videos. If you want to check that out, then I would recommend reading The Housing Question by Friedrich Engels, but also there is Explain the Housing Crisis by Second Thought, and there's also like How Socialists Solved Housing by the Gravel Institute, which basically kind of like just repeats a lot of the stuff that I say here. So anyways, without further ado, let's get started on the video. This video is going to be talking about the very given facts and material problems of the facing majority of the people of the United States of America right now, as well as the overall world throughout the simple transaction of exchanging money to buy a commodity, then having to be presentable for others to live on pay quotas, financing the commodity once again, so that way you can accumulate a form of finance capital into the commodity, then to do so once again with the same commodity. I am of course referring to the buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat method, or the Burr method. This is a commonly used method from landlords to exceed the price of rent in a massive degree that it should not be, which makes housing in the United States all more unavailable, as well as right besides investors also seek to share of the paid rent. This is a video with a 10-point argument with reasoning and sources that talk about the Burr method and how it is very destructive towards a more useful and humane way of having housing. This you can say is a critique of the Burr method and the very system that it is rooted in. You can say this is biased in a way, of course it is, but biased with an objectified factors and sources. So, without further ado, let us begin. First, let's talk about the Burr method and the market, and in order for the Burr method to be instituted. The Burr method is exactly what I just described in this introduction and also the preface. This is the method that is used by landlords under our modern format of capitalism that can extract more rent from their tenants and increase their wealth immensely by leeching the life and well-being of others, mostly workers that have sold their labor power and work labor time into the workday to get paid with wages based on the amount of time they work. The Burr method stands for buying, rehabbing, renting, refinancing, and repeat. This is a way where lords can take property and try to get profit from the very ability to own a house and allow others to live in them. This is not new. In fact, this is a more modern and leeching form of how aristocrats would own land that was given to them from a monarch that had peasants living in that land, to where they desire to stay on that land. They had to pay off demands of the nobles. This is in fact where the term landlord originated, under feudalism, where people were appointed by a monarch or supposedly chosen by God himself to rule over a land where others live. Thus a lord of land, hence landlord. A lord of land people was granted permissions to live under the conditions for demands of the lord that is met as a form of payment. With the emergence of the generalizing of the market format and using commodity production on a massive scale, there was an ability to be able to exchange your way to that point, actually, now. And the aristocracy as we know it was limiting itself and was withering away as time spoke after the bourgeois revolutions had took care of the very feudalist system. But now the landlord tree and the various idea of an aristocracy was gone, but the remains of it through landlords of exchanging housing remained. With the emergence of the generalizing the market and using commodity production on a massive scale, there was an ability to exchange your way to that point, as well as an ability of the very system and the very functions of exchange value being put into practice in the very ways of having housing that acts as the amount of land you grant to others to live. Thus, like what capitalism has made us to do, we have been made us to exchange money for commodities, where commodities are the very things we need and desire as well. Markets as a function is a system in which commodities exchange. Here, this can amass massive amounts of wealth for the owners of the house and property at hand, because the tenants are exchanging their own ability to live in another person's bought property that then is bought to be personal property, but then bought in a special form of private property through rental property. All of this then means it is that for houses that are bought then gets turned into a well-living place. Then instead of providing people that house or living there, you have to be rented into the market as a house available for exchange, as well as repeating this over and over. But here is the thing about a commodity and the market. There is not a guarantee that these houses will be provided for people that need the houses. For a commodity to be bought, there must be money that is presented at a certain amount of money, which circulates in a medium for exchange to the commodities you buy. As in, you must pay for the price of the house, or you can bargain, but even when you bargain, it is a way where two interests are conflicting in either way causes the depravity of the other. I'll give an example. The landlord wants to have the tenant rent for the highest amount possible. The tenant wants it at the lowest amount possible. Thus, the lord must settle for the highest acceptable amount possible. But when they do, they can limit the ability to have them bargain, for housing itself is always based on the exchange of money for commodities. Thus, a form of manipulation can come where the tenant would not really have much of a choice but accept the price of rent that the lord gives. Thus, the lord can control the supply and thus be able to make their own demand with the competition between the monopolization of house owning and renting. Now, let's go to the actual factors in which the lord is able to actually obtain this house under capitalism. One of the major aspects for the use of housing and the use of them for exchange and to get profit is buying property, rehabbing it, then have it be able to either be a vacation home or rental property, as well with a Airbnb having it a vacation rental home. Thus, while living there, shelter is one of the most needed things that humans need to be able to live and get rest. Homelessness is then a problem that needs to be addressed, that most decent people that agree with the premise of needing for housing that it is a problem. But even with all of this, even though how important housing is, the United States is now in the collision of a housing crisis from the very structure itself. First off, as shown in statistics, looking at the housing market today, there is few single-family homes to be bought for a way to get more profit from a more appealing audience. There is just simply a lack of sales for people who need the housing the most, for there is no way they can meet the needed demand for profit from the home seller. The house that do go up for the sale are then bought for very quickly, a week at times, even 2 days at times as well, which is very quick, having offered tens of thousands of dollars over the listing price. This increases the price to a huge amount where it is absurd, more absurd than the surge of prices of housing back in 2006. Some of it has to do with the lack of cheap, durable resources being produced, as well as the slight decline of housing production per year. But that is not the big picture. The goal at hand here is young people trying to buy houses to have permanent residency. Yet even in the most basic starter homes, housing price is out of reach with the financial conditions of these people have. Now let's understand why this is the case. And to do that, we have to understand investment, financing, and finance capital. These prices have been manipulated so far up by massive amounts of money pouring into the housing markets to buy up homes as investment properties to set the Burr theory to praxis, including the homes of those who were evicted during the pandemic. Even worse, some large investment firms are lobbying to end eviction protections so that way they can buy up even more houses, which only incentivizes the pressure of the housing market and causing more people to be homeless, all at the same time. This produces massive amounts of eviction through trying to have others pay a huge amount of rent, and this has caused a massive surge of eviction all over the United States, as well as a massive amounts of foreclosures that will have millions of families struggling to find a decent home. This did not just happen during the pandemic, mind you. This has been happening for quite a while. In places like New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Phoenix, Seattle, Chicago, and other cities, median rents for apartments which one bedroom could cost $2,500 per month or even more. A third of the population of Los Angeles spends majority of their income on housing costs. In New York City, 20% of all renters pay most of their income to their landlord. So bad to the point that barely anyone has the time to get the needed technological items in our modern world. Nor is it just the big cities. 95% of all U.S. counties go through this problem. The Harvard Center for Housing Studies warns a new normal for the housing in the United States. All this stems off from housing being exchanged into a system in which commodities exchange, instead of having housing act as a utility for these goods to distribute insufficient planning. And with this repetitive monopolization creates increasing poverty in relation to the standard of living normally in the United States. With all of this, including the method to repeat this practice once again, over and over, amounts to so many living in poverty and in precarious positions. Even with housing being occupied, people are barely able to pay their rent, all because of the massive commodification of housing that as landlords repeat the Burr method. Thus, this leads to someone that is not able to pay, either because their landlord raised the rent or because they cannot work for reasons or another. They are not able to stay in their homes. If things go well, yes, they can live with their families, friends, maybe transitional housing for a bit. But for the majority of the population, this is not the case. Yet we still have unoccupied housing that is owned for the sake of trying to sell the ability to live in the household, or to have the house as well. In the population of New York, around 75,000 people, about the seating capacity of Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, in the city are homeless and have been homeless, and just now had residency, but living in very underdeveloped world conditions. 19,000 of those people have access to homeless shelters. Only 19,000 of the 75,000 people have access to homeless shelters. In other words, only 19,000 of basically what you can compare to the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum only has access to homeless shelters to where they can live. The majority of the people that actually are homeless, though, they sleep in the fucking streets, unfortunately. This all has happened because the primary focus of trying to sell a commodity is not to house people, it is to exchange it, and thus make a profit. Although there is plenty of empty houses that could be filled, we were to focus on the use value of products, not the exchange value. Because of the market, however, this is not the case. For through the exchanging of commodities, this produces the drive for profit, thus more profitable to repeat on the building houses and condominiums that is massively invested, to the point where it drives up the expression of value, hence fewer homes for people that need them. That need it most, like the working class. This is then we can find ourselves a conclusion. I wanted to highlight the major conclusion among this work. All of this just shows the failures of the market and the lack of social services from the state that will lead out of the neoliberal idea that the markets are self-sustainable. This can only be further from the material actions of the matter. Here we see the failures of the markets when it comes to providing products to consumers and providing humane treatment towards humans. More capitalism and more the facilitation of capital and more houses being for rent just to be financed to an impossible rent pay won't help with the crisis. I can't believe even people believe people are seriously trying to blame socialization and utilization for this problem, when the problem is clearly privatization and commodification. The problem for housing is because more bourgeois people are buying out houses, rent out tenants that can ask investors and banks to finance into the house, to finance the capital that the labor went into the commodity, that went into the finance the capital that went into the commodity, which draws up the value. Capital is the command over unpaid labor of others. The house of the worker can only become capital, therefore, if he rents it to a third person and appropriates a part of the labor product. This third person in the form of rent, by the fact that the worker lives in it himself. The house is prevented from becoming capital, just as the cost ceases to be capital at the moment someone buys it. From the tailor and put it on. From the tailor to the worker. The worker who owns little house to the value of 1,000 tailors is certainly no longer a proletarian, but one must understand that this does not necessarily call him a capitalist, but rather a petty capitalist. But even thus, in order to basically in order for a proletarian to actually be able to understand capital within the house, they can't really access to that. Their landlord does for them, which essentially presents them to be a tenant in the first place. The only solution for workers on the housing crisis is to have them live like rat. The only solution for workers on the mind of the bourgeois is to have them live like rats in the worst conditions possible, for it is cheap and is the only ways they can afford housing now. This is no way to live, and it only deprives the worker from any form of humanity and is treated like a lab rat for a bourgeois. The only way you can defend this is to say that we need to focus on the economy more than human lives, because the economy will take care of humanity anyway, eventually. That is such a mystified reality from the actual struggles of workers in our world, and what positions they are facing, especially with the entire study of political economy itself centering around the question, what way will economic actions benefit others, as David Ricardo himself puts it. There is simply just no need for us to use money in this manner anymore, nor even when it comes to the international situations at hand, and as well as the other systems that can be made to provide utilities, not commodities. We wouldn't need a market if we are to have production for products based on the use value of them, that is calculated based on the input of industry and output of the commodity, where the labor and the production process in the hands of the workers themselves. No more to exchange goods, but only use money as to tax industry itself. So that way, there is a objective resource to perform calculations on, as well as the move to abolish money entirely, thus creating a new entire system and not just transformation of economic changes, but for a new society, one based on the free association of laborers themselves to do what they wish themselves to do. Then they can print a labor voucher that measures the amount of labor that a laborer performs. Then the labor voucher can be turned in for a laborer to get what they desire from the means of consumption, rather than having the Koch brothers lobby anti-eviction protection measures as they buy up homes and to try to have others pay ridiculous amounts of money to get an overproduced item. This is no way to live, and the only solution here is socialism, or the worker state, and communism. There is better ways in order to run an economy rather than essentially basing ourselves into an exchange format that is based on the precarious positions of others in order for a person to profit from the production, from the labor of other people. Rather, all labor should be in the hands of the laborer themselves, in which they can essentially benefit from themselves, as well as this can collectively produce consequences in which this can benefit others, based on the enjoyment of the laborer themselves and the free choice of that laborer themselves, regardless of money, but rather use products based on the use value of them and not the exchange value, thus producing more freedom and more power to the individual themselves. And the only way to get to there is, from the aspects of the worker state that is able to perform this economic calculation, that inevitably is just an act of a transformation that can actually create a freely associated society, one without class, money, or the state entirely, but based on the individual of production themselves, either to each according to their contribution to society in socialism and in communism, from each according to their ability to each according to their need. And this is one of the best ways, honestly, that, society can be formed, because there you are able to actually put the power of humanity to themselves, where humanity and humans are able to produce the products that they do entirely and be able to get enjoyment from it once they essentially are able to benefit themselves from their own production, and in consequence also benefit others as well, in full enjoyment and free choice to what they do and how long they do it as well, and full access to do so as well. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, then hit the like button down below. I'd very much appreciate it. If you're new to my channel, hit the subscribe button. I'd also very much appreciate that. And yeah, this is a very huge problem that, we are facing today. And honestly, it's about time we actually address this, and it's about time we basically get stuff underway to actually making a revolutionary transformation of society entirely in order to negate the very market itself. And thus providing more homes for people that actually need them, and the actual use value of which someone could actually have a house, rather than just building a house for no one to occupy it entirely, because that's just useless at that point. Why would you build a house when no one can basically just live in there? And rather have all products be based on the use value of the individual themselves, on what they basically produce and how useful it can basically be to others as well, which is purely subjective and purely based on the power of the subject themselves, of the human being. So rather than the human being being treated as an object to basically have to fulfill tasks in order to basically live in that house, there are simply better ways, and there's better resources in which housing and various other things can be provided to people that need them, and a way where these things can be used rather than wasted in order to produce further crises and further problems within society. There, everyone can basically have access to do what they wish, and based on the different needs and abilities that everybody has, for each individual as their own free choice to do. It produces freedom, not necessarily equality per se, but freedom. Pure freedom and pure aspects to where the individual themselves has power, and that power of the individual being able to create the collective itself. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, hit the like button down below. And yeah, share this video entirely with others, so that way this video can basically be shared to others, and we can be able to spread class and political consciousness this way. Anyways, yeah, thank you for watching this video. And sources are in the link of the description, as well as organizations down below in which you can get involved in order to provide this. And yeah, thank you for watching this video, and Socialist Links is out.